Yes, welcome. This is Rebuilding Family Foundation coming all the way from Kenya so that we can be able to enjoy the knowledge and wisdom which you're going to get from this program this evening. I'm really happy and excited. I know some of you have been waiting for this day as you are going to talk about how can you become a leader of influence. Very key and very important. If you can get my transmission, you can get my signal, kindly tell someone we are Rebuilding Family Foundation has just started so that they can sit down and we can see how we can be able to build up ourselves. We can add knowledge to ourselves. We can add wisdom to ourselves. And much more than that, we can make ourselves to become better people in one way or the other. Becoming a leader of influence. Many of you will agree with me today in most of our institutions, most of our corporate institutions, it is very much common to find out that in one way or the other, when it comes to emotional intelligence, people are taught very well from a corporate point of view. They build up the emotional intelligence. They can be able to understand other people's feelings, how they behave in different ways. Some, they build up their IQ, intelligence quotient, very high. They read books and they become extremely smart in one way or the other, and many other form of quotient. However, when it comes to leadership intelligence, there's a very big gap, because in leadership intelligence, there are three key things which you are checking. One, influence, impact, and income. When someone builds this kind of intelligence, three key achievement and signs will be the level of influence, the level of impact among the people, and the income, even in the project which one does in one way or the other. However, how can we build it? Do we have people who are growing up in the same line in one way or the other? Today we have Dr. Jason Musyoka, who is going to be the guest for our program. Jason Musyoka, I've known him for quite some years, from when he was much younger in age until now he's a family man. Currently he's the CEO and the founder of the Frontline Group and also associate researcher with the University of Pretoria, among many other things which he does, as he'll be sharing together with us. Let us get ready to learn on philosophies of life and how we can grow to become better as individuals in one way or the other. Let me bring my guest today, Dr. Jason Musyoka. Karibu sana. Yes, how are you, Dr. Jason Musyoka?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me today, Reverend Collins.
Oh, thanks a lot. Na karibu sana. Karibu sana. I'm very happy to have you on studio.
You can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you very, very okay. Very, very okay. I really appreciate you for being available for our program this night. Maybe there are some people who might not know you. They have never met with you before, as we have actually gotten to know each other. Maybe you can introduce yourself at this particular point.
Thank you so much. Am I loud and clear from your studio?
Yes, loud and clear from my side.
Thank you so much. So my name, as you've heard, is Jason Musyoka. I hold a PhD in business leadership and a master's in development economics, and I straddle professionally between development economics and business leadership, and that encapsulates consulting work, particularly around economic strategies in South Africa, in the region, SADC, but I've also done a lot of work in other regions such as ECOWAS and IGAD. And I'm also a global consultant to the United Nations on a number of very important studies, including the NIAM, the Human Development Report in Kenya, which I'm leading a list of academics or scholars who are developing that report for the United Nations Development Program. I'm also the founder of the Frontline Group, a research firm that is headquartered in South Africa, Pretoria, but it has its reach far and wide. Again, we do extensive work within the continent and farther afield, including countries such as Mauritius, which we've continued to reach out beyond the continent. And then thirdly, I am also the founding principal of the Frontline Training Institute, and that's also a continent-wide program that is currently being accredited both by South African authorities, but also by Commonwealth regional institutions. And fourthly, I am also a researcher based at the University of Pretoria at the Center for Mediation in Africa. And then number 5, I'm also a theologian. I run a ministry known as the End Time Revival Ministries, which makes use of my theological training. And as far as the preaching ministry or gospel ministry is concerned, we do apologetics work, we do evangelism work, and we do training work also among ministers. So in summary, that's my professional life, but linked to that, I am a family man. I am married to one wife and 2 wonderful kids, 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, Zoe and Liam, who are our beloved kids. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. Back to you, Reverend Collins.
Thank you very much. I'm happy and excited as a theologian and much more as someone who is well-versed and trained as a corporate person and a consultant for different countries, including Kenya, in one way or the other. Many might be wondering, where did the journey start? Because I remember back in one of the schools where I trained in ministry, at my starting point, you came in and you joined. And from that point, something started happening. Where did your journey start? As a young man who was so zealous for the kingdom of God, and now you're expanding your influence beyond the 4 walls of the church.
So I think the pretext is that, and if you remember well, Reverend Collins, I remember so when I completed high school in 1998, I used to study in Tala High School, and it was a boarding school with the typical ebbs and webs of a boarding school. But I got very committed to God. I was part of the Christian Union in Tala High School, and I had what philosophically one would term as a tunnel vision, that my biggest mission and vision in life was to really go out and preach the gospel. That was my objective in life, and nothing else mattered. I went to my dad and recommended that is what I felt I wanted to do. So he went ahead to try and see how I can get some theological training, and I was very excited about it. That was in Kisumu. You might recall, Reverend Collins, that I was very tiny and young, and I had never traveled out of Mombasa for any given time. So your mom actually took me to the college on the very first day, my first year, my day 1. And I remember that trip. We traveled overnight, arrived, and for 2 years I trained there, a lot of discipline and so on. And I do remember one of my very good friends who was he was a Tanzanian preacher. He came out to me and said to me that I was young. I was the youngest at the time on campus. And he said to me that he felt that God wanted me to deepen myself and to do much more and still serve the kingdom. I disputed that immediately. It didn't occur to me that was in any way God speaking. But it followed that he was a father figure, so he almost forced me to do further studies. Really just left the college. He never even completed. So it was God sent to me, and I pursued those theological studies here in South Africa for 3 years. But I remember consistently the advice that I was young and I needed to expand myself and serve God in a much broader way than in that tunnel vision. So I think those interactions with people and seeing what people were doing, and I remember seeing some guys who would come to college and they would minister, but they were either aeronautic engineers or they were lawyers. And that really planted a seed in me, because I recognized that these were people who were serving God as lawyers, as engineers, and so on. And they would have an opportunity to come and minister. And I figured out this is not what I thought about lawyers and engineers and so on. So that was the initial seed that was planted in me, that there were talents that were latent within, that I needed to go out and make sure that I trade those talents. So up to that point, I think there was, maybe let me stop at that, but up to that point, there was, of course, now a much more enlightenment on the opportunities and realizing the world is what John Calvin, the magisterial reformer, referred to it as a theatrum gloriae Deo. What that really means is that it is one glorious theater of God, and that God is present in legal spaces, He is present in markets, He is present in the everywhere, because the world is His glorious theater, and the church is this part of that glorious theater of God that there is in the world. And each one of us has a role to play, not just in the most visible part of God's glorious theater, but even in the invisible spaces, whether it's artists or drivers or mechanics, but doing it knowing that you are in God's platform and God's theater. And that was revolutionary for me.
Thanks a lot. That's really encouraging. You have just reminded me. My late father used to tell me, because I got born again at the age of 15, and I loved and had a passion to preach the gospel to people from the age of 15. By the time I was 18 years, I started the first interdenominational organization run by a student who is in high school, with an audience of people who, some of them were working from different institutions and who had cleared university and other kind of things. I remember one thing he told me, that, young man, you are lucky to be born again when you are young, but I respect the fact that I can see a call in your life. However, I won't like you in future to be like a street preacher, born again young, preaching different places without background training in your area of calling. And it really motivated me as a young boy to think about, how can I start a journey of building myself as far as my academic is concerned. And as I hear your story, it's the same thing. How could you build up yourself to become a competent preacher, not just only in the four walls of the church, but beyond the walls of the church? Now, viewers, this is very key and very important, because we're living at a time when many Kenyans are being told education is not important. You don't need it. We are living at a time where even many preachers today, they say anointing is enough, and there's no need for people to venture out and even learn and educate themselves so that they can become relevant in this global world in which we are in. In the Garden of Eden, man was given God's presence, man was given marriage, and man was given the task to work. But for him to work and make the earth and the universe, the earth to be better, knowledge was key and paramount. What philosophies did Dr. Jason use so that he can grow up from being a minister of the gospel alone and become a minister to different areas of life? I'm getting back to Jason, even as he's going to tell us about some of the philosophies of life which helped him to grow up in his ambition and trust in God while impacting the life of many people. Back to you, Jason, Dr. Jason. Yes, philosophy. Which philosophies did you pick and come up with so that you can get to where you are today? Still a corporate individual and a pastor in South Africa. and not just a person in South Africa, church, which the whites are the majority and not a common thing within South Africa.
Right. So I think, again, let me just preamble this with some guiding philosophies that guide people's lives, and then I will bring this to the one that really, for me, is the most critical and the one that I have attempted to follow. In the 5th century, there was a philosopher known as Protagoras, and Protagoras was grappling with the idea. He was a Greek philosopher grappling with the idea of the definition of a fundamental question on who am I. And he was not alone. You have others who came. There are thousands, of course, of philosophers, but the most consequential, the one was Protagoras' idea of that man is the measure of all things. That's a philosophy of life that suggests that I'm the center and everything else revolves around me. And that would mean that anything that makes me successful or makes me happy, that is really what I should pursue. And then much later in the 18th century, we had Adam Smith, who is the father of modern economics. And his philosophy was that man is an animal that makes bargains. And he saw everybody as pursuing self-interests. I'm just summarizing this and perhaps pointing the readers to go and do a little bit more analysis or reading around Protagoras and Adam Smith, who lived between around 1723 to 1790 and so on. And then you have the third one, who is consequential as well, Albert Camus. Albert Camus was an Algerian philosopher, and his philosophy in life was that man is a useless passion. And his idea is that there's no meaning. People are just random. They are running around a track, making no sense about life. There's no purpose. You live, you make money, you fail, you die. And so his idea of man is that man is a useless passion. But if you look at all of those philosophies, they have taken specific forms today, where people have this sense that either pursue money by all means possible. And that's why you see so much corruption, for example, happening. You see such chaos and conflicts happening because it's Adam Smith's philosophy of man as an animal that makes bargains, for example, or man the center of all things. What you're seeing now with a lot of cults and so on, it is to place man at the center and not really asking the deeper questions of life. Why am I here in the first place? And to help others answer that question, why you are here. That is a question of seeking a meaning and a purpose and a destiny in life. Those are three fundamental things. What is your meaning? What is the meaning of your life? What is the purpose of your life? And what is your destiny? And those questions a lot of people go through without really asking fundamentally those questions. Now, let me come back to answering then those three questions for myself. The idea of being a preacher for me as a young man growing up, I felt that was the sense of, it gave me a sense of meaning. I wanted to say at the end of my life, I have done something that is somehow consequential, that I have to present to God. But that was very limited. And as I said earlier, a very tunnel vision. And there is a second aspect of what is my purpose. It's not just what I have to work for in life, but what satisfies me. And I think with that, that's when I started questioning and asking, am I fully satisfied? Am I fulfilling all my talents? And then the third question, of course, is the question of what is my destiny? Ultimately, where do I want to go in life? So asking those major questions, a lot of people don't ask those questions in their daily lives. They really leave that, as I said, Albert Camus' philosophy of useless passion and just running around the track. So for me, the search for meaning, and I figured out that I love specific things. I love social life, sharing, and all of that. And that's very important for me, generosity and making sure that other people's lives are better in one way or another. And I also figured out that I love talking. And that is not a consequence of you know, of it's not a random consequence. Talking is a talent. If you structure, you study, you begin to realize that you can make use of these public platforms or conversation to persuade people. So the idea of conversation and talking, my wife always accuses me that I love talking a lot, but I said, look, I can't help it. It's a talent. And then the third thing that I found that I was satisfied with is writing. So I figured out that I love to reach out to people and I empathize with people. I tend to be generous to the extent possible. I realized that I have a gift of public talking and public speaking. And then thirdly, I have a talent of writing. If you lock me in the Northern Hemisphere somewhere where all I do is just reaching out to people and talking and writing, you don't even have to pay me. I'm very satisfied with that. But then the way God has designed these things, it is so that your talents that you're most comfortable with, it is your opportunity to meet opportunities. Now, let me just repeat that. It's your opportunity to meet other opportunities, because people pay you for doing things. They pay you for writing. They pay you for public speaking. They pay you for all of these things that are really your gift and talent. But what you pursue most is not so much the payment. It is just that it is the systems that God himself has created so that we can enhance our talents and our gifts and leave a mark in the world. So those three aspects, as I said, discovering your talent becomes very critical, and asking yourself those hard questions and asking your friends what you're good at, and realizing that there are some things that you're not good at. Those that you're not good at, you begin to minimize your attention, but then you focus your full diligence and discipline and determination on your gifts and talents, which in my case, as I said, I've realized that those are talents I have. Let me add one thing, Reverend Collins. I like arguing, and again, you can turn that to the negative, the idea of arguing. And I remember there are a lot of conversations where I've been shut down and I've been told you just want to argue for the sake of it. My wife has accused me for arguing for the sake of arguing, but I realized also that it's a talent. It's a talent that I can make use of those logical arguments for the gospel, which is where my theological apologetics come in. And I love the public debates and debating with people. I can't help it but to debate and to try and prove other arguments that I don't see their logic to be absurd, and to point out the internal contradictions of arguments that are put forward. So you can make use of that. Those are talents that sometimes we shut them down in our children. We think that they are simply argumentative. We think that they are simply too playful. We think that they are not taking life serious. But in actual sense, what we are really doing is shutting down the opportunities for their growth of their talents. And I'm very grateful that I got the opportunities that I got to enhance these talents that otherwise, if you simply find them out there in the market, you might shut them down as non-consequential. And yet, as far as I'm concerned, tremendous talents that I'm forever grateful to God that he has given me those talents. And I use them to advance business. I use them for academia purposes. I use them for theological apologetics and all of those opportunities that I find.
That's really great. When you have talked about talent and gift, you've just reminded me one of the field in which I practice today in psychology, specifically in psychometrics, whereby upon finding that 80% of Kenyans are career misplaced, then that one means no matter how they get educated and they're totally misplaced, then there'll be a disaster. The reproductivity of the individuals will be in contrast to the abilities and the intelligence they have. And since I started practicing psychometrics, doing a lot of assessment to people, the intelligence level, speed of their brain, their abilities, their psychomotor, how their brain and their body coordinates in day-to-day activity, even assessing them to know what they can naturally do and succeed. I've seen most of the clients who come to my office for psychometric assessment, they end up working with a lot of fulfillment than people who have taken career because of the grade which they had, or because of the current market then, or opinion of parents who have not been available for them even to discover the uniqueness of their talent and gifts, which is part of the things which some few of us were privileged. Because I remember by the time my mom took you to the first college you went where I was, your parents believed in you. I can remember your uncle, who was my pastor then in the forces, who believed in the gifting in you, and they recommended you to go and train, and the journey started at that particular point. However, many people are not privileged even to get to that point whereby as young as they are, they can be able to discover themselves. The question of who are you? Actually, in most of my training, when I ask people that question, they give me their biodata. They give me about their titles they have based on their career. Some respond by the gender identity they have, because it's one of the things which is so much hidden within our journey of studies. We learn so much about our environment, but there's no time taken for us to discover who we are, which is very key. But at the end of the day, we become slaves of thinkers when we think we are thinking, yet we are not. And it becomes a religion. I'm very happy and excited because of that philosophy, which helped you to answer some of the most pertinent questions about life. Now, based on that, I've heard you did ministry training, you did theological training, then you started now focusing on training based on your interest and your passion. Before you talk about that, let me acknowledge some few people. Celeste Mary, who is saying, I'm right tuned in. That's my wife. I'm happy because of the support. We have Kak Bolos. He says, text him. He's very happy about him. Actually, if you have any question to Dr. Jason, kindly, you can just throw your question and your concern, even as he's going to share with you about his life journey. We have Bolo Production. That's my son saying, I agree with the concept and the philosophy being shared this particular point. We have Grace Tinga, all the way from Mariakani. I'm very happy about you, Grace. Thank you for joining us in this forum today. We have someone, I suspect this is from South Africa, Mr. Descent Kapil Gore, who says, good night. He's giving us greetings, even as he's joining us all the way, I presume, from South Africa. If you can hear us and this information is good, impacting, and important, kindly share with us. Much more than that, you can join our Facebook page, our Facebook page, Rebuilding Family Foundation Academy, or Collins Bolo, or you can join us in our YouTube channel, Rebuilding Family Foundation, or CTCC Kenya. As you join us, you can be able to get more and more information. Yes, we have Mr. Ernest Amukoa. Yes, he's saying questions are never asked in many churches, leading to spiritual ignorance in the congregation. Eventually, many people end up where they are deceived. Very true. Many people in churches, they're not given a chance to question. In the church where I pastor, sometime in the middle of a preaching, someone will just raise up his hand and ask a question. And when visitors come, they wonder, like, why should you ask a question to the pastor on stage? With us, it's all about dialogue and getting to understand more and more. From Tala to Kisumu and South Africa, today God is doing great things through Dr. Jason Musyoka. Back to you, Jason Musyoka. How do you balance ministry and corporate and government consultancy? Yes. How do you balance between ministry, corporate activities, and government consultancy?
Right. So I think the very